I stood in the elegant ballroom I had booked a year ago, my heart racing as my sister Amber walked through those double doors wearing my custom wedding gown. She was holding the arm of Derek, my fiancé. She giggled like this was all some delightful joke and announced they were eloping tonight. My mother actually clapped her hands together and said Amber looked so much better in white than I ever could. My throat tightened, my hands trembled, but I kept my face calm. I pulled out my phone with steady fingers and turned the screen toward them. Their smiles froze instantly. The room went completely silent. Let me take you back 3 months to help you understand how I got to that moment. My name is Janelle, and I thought I had everything figured out. I was 28 years old, working as a marketing manager at a mid-sized firm in our town, and I was engaged to Derek Patterson, the man I believed was my soulmate. We had been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months, and I had spent every spare moment planning what I thought would be the perfect wedding. The dress was my pride and joy. I had worked with a local boutique for months to design something truly special. It cost $7,000, which was more than I had ever spent on anything in my life. The dress required 6 separate fittings to get every detail perfect. The designer incorporated lace from our grandmother's veil into the bodice, making it a connection to family history. At least, that is what I thought at the time. The gown was ivory silk, with delicate beading across the sweetheart neckline, and it fit me like it had been painted onto my body. When I looked at myself in that dress during the final fitting, I actually cried. I felt beautiful for the first time in years. My relationship with my younger sister Amber had always been complicated. She was 25, 3 years younger than me, and we had been in competition our entire lives. Except it was not really a competition because she always won. Amber was the pretty one, the charming one, the one who could walk into a room and command attention without even trying. She had golden blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, bright blue eyes, and a smile that made people want to give her whatever she asked for. I had always been the responsible one, the practical one, the one who worked hard and kept my head down. Our mother, Patricia, made no secret of which daughter she preferred. From the time we were children, she compared us constantly. Amber got the compliments, the encouragement, the affection. I got criticism and dismissal. When I graduated top of my class in high school, my mother said it was because I had no social life to distract me. When Amber barely passed, my mother praised her for being well-rounded and popular. When I got my first job out of college, my mother said I was lucky anyone hired me. When Amber got fired from 3 jobs in a row, my mother said those employers just did not appreciate her free spirit. I tried to tell myself it did not matter. I built a life I was proud of even without my mother's approval. I had good friends, a career I enjoyed, and then I met Derek. He was a pharmaceutical sales representative, charming and attentive, and he made me feel special in a way my family never had. When he proposed, I thought I had finally won something Amber could not take from me. The engagement party 6 months ago should have been my first warning. Amber showed up in a dress that was practically identical to mine, just a shade lighter. She spent the entire evening hanging on Derek's arm, laughing at his jokes, touching his shoulder, leaning in close when he spoke. My mother laughed and said it was harmless fun, that Amber was just being friendly. Derek seemed uncomfortable but did not tell her to stop. I pushed down the knot in my stomach and told myself I was being paranoid and insecure. As the wedding approached, I noticed more red flags. Derek started texting constantly, tilting his phone away when I walked by. He claimed it was work stress, that a big promotion was coming up, and he needed to stay on top of communications. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him because the alternative was too painful to consider. 2 weeks before the wedding, Amber asked if she could see my dress. She said she wanted to admire it, to see what her big sister would look like on her special day. Something in her tone made me refuse. I told her it was bad luck, that she would see it on the wedding day like everyone else. She pouted and our mother called me selfish, but I held firm. The guilt ate at me for days. I wondered if I was being cruel, if my insecurities were making me suspicious of my own sister. 1 week before the wedding, Derek told me he needed some space to handle the stress. He said he was staying at his apartment to get some work done and clear his head. I did not argue. I was drowning in my own wedding stress, finalizing details with caterers and florists and the photographer. I barely slept, running through checklists in my mind, making sure everything would be perfect. 3 days before the wedding, I arrived at the ballroom for our rehearsal. I had been looking forward to this moment for months. My bridesmaids, Sarah and Lauren, had been my friends since college. They were already there when I arrived, setting up small decorations and making sure the chairs were arranged properly. They hugged me tight and told me everything was going to be beautiful. Derek arrived late, which was unusual for him. He was always punctual, sometimes annoyingly so. He looked uncomfortable in his suit, tugging at his collar, avoiding eye contact with me. I asked if he was okay, and he said he was fine, just nervous. I squeezed his hand and told him we would get through this together. Then the doors opened, and Amber walked in. She was wearing my dress. My custom, $7,000, six-fitting grandmother lace-incorporated wedding dress. It hugged her body perfectly because we were nearly the same size, though she had always been just a bit curvier, just a bit more of everything that men seem to want. Her blonde hair was styled in loose curls, and she wore my veil, the one I had chosen specifically to match the lace detailing. She was holding Derek's arm like they were the couple getting married. The smile on her face was triumphant. She giggled, actually giggled, and said, "Surprise! We're eloping tonight." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. The air left my lungs and I could not draw another breath. Sarah gasped beside me. Lauren grabbed my arm to steady me. The room full of people, mostly Derek's family and our mutual friends who had come for the rehearsal, stared in shocked silence. Then my mother started clapping. Patricia stood up from her chair in the front row, beaming like this was the best news she had ever heard. "Oh, Amber, you look so much better in white than Janelle ever could. You are absolutely glowing." Derek would not look at me. He stared at the floor, his jaw tight, but he did not let go of Amber's arm. He did not step away from her. He did not say this was a mistake, or a joke, or anything that would make this nightmare stop. Amber launched into an explanation, her voice bright and cheerful like she was sharing wonderful news. She said that she and Derek had been in love for months. She said the dress was meant for a real bride, not someone Derek had settled for out of obligation. She said I should be grateful they were telling me now, instead of letting me go through with a loveless marriage. My mother nodded along, adding her own commentary. She said Derek had come to her weeks ago, confessing that he felt trapped, that he had only proposed to me because he felt sorry for me. She said Amber had comforted him, that love had blossomed between them naturally, and that true love could not be denied. Then Patricia dropped the real bomb. She said she had given Amber the key to my apartment so she could take the dress. She said it was the right thing to do, because Amber deserved to be a bride more than I did. She said I should be thankful that anyone wanted to marry me at all, and I should step aside gracefully and let the people who truly loved each other be together. Derek finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic, but the words cut deeper than anything else. He said he had only proposed to me out of obligation, that we had been together so long he felt he owed it to me. But then he got to know Amber better, really know her, and he realized she was his soulmate. He said he was sorry, but he could not marry me when his heart belonged to someone else. The guests were horrified. Derek's parents, Margaret and Thomas, looked like they wanted to sink through the floor. His mother's face was pale, her hand pressed to her mouth. His father's jaw was clenched, his eyes blazing with anger, but he remained silent. My bridesmaids were crying. The wedding coordinator stood frozen by the door, her clipboard hanging forgotten at her side. And I just stood there, the ghost bride at her own rehearsal, watching my entire future crumble around me. But here is what none of them knew. I had not been blind for as long as they thought. 2 weeks earlier, when Derek's behavior had become impossible to ignore, I had done something I never thought I would do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Mr. Harrison, a retired police detective, who now ran a small investigation firm. He was a family friend, someone my father had known before he passed away 3 years ago. When I called him, my voice shaking, and explained what I suspected, he did not judge me. He just said he would look into it. What he found was so much worse than an affair. So when Amber finished her cruel little speech, when my mother finished gloating, when Derek finished his pathetic apology, I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not collapse. Instead, I pulled out my phone with steady hands. My voice was calm when I spoke, so calm it made several people flinch. I have something to show all of you. I turned my phone screen toward them and pressed play on a video. The quality was clear, recorded by a small camera Mr. Harrison had installed in Derek's apartment after confirming my suspicions. The footage showed Derek's living room, and there were 3 people visible: Derek, Amber, and my mother. The audio was crystal clear. My mother's voice came through first, sharp and calculating, nothing like the sugary tone she used in public. She was coaching them, telling them exactly how to break me. She said the key was to make me think I was worthless, to destroy my confidence so thoroughly that I would call off the wedding myself. That way, she explained, they could keep all the deposits. Amber asked what she meant by deposits. Patricia laughed and said she had been managing the wedding expenses for me, taking payments from the fund my father had left specifically for my wedding. The fund had contained $45,000. She had transferred it all to her personal account weeks ago. If I called off the wedding, she could claim the vendors had been paid, but refuse refunds. If the wedding went forward, she would have to actually pay the vendors and lose access to the money. Derek asked about his cut. Patricia promised him $20,000 to go along with the plan. All he had to do was pretend to love Amber, let her wear the dress, humiliate me publicly so I would be too broken to fight back. Then they could split the money 3 ways and go their separate ways after. Amber's voice on the video was the worst. She said she did not even really want Derek, she just wanted to finally win against me. She said she was tired of me acting like I was so much better just because I had a stable job and a normal life. She said taking my fiancé and my wedding dress was about proving she could have anything I had, whenever she wanted it. The room erupted. Derek's mother, Margaret, let out a sound like a wounded animal. His father, Thomas, stood up so fast his chair fell backward. The wedding coordinator's mouth hung open in shock. My bridesmaids were staring at my mother and sister like they were monsters they had never seen before. Patricia lunged for my phone, trying to grab it out of my hands. But Thomas moved faster, stepping between us and holding my mother back with one firm hand on her shoulder. His voice was thunder when he spoke, telling her not to take another step. Derek tried to stammer out an excuse. He said the video was edited, that it was taken out of context, that I was crazy and desperate. But I was not done yet. I swiped to the next item on my phone. Bank statements. Months and months of bank statements showing transactions from accounts in my name, accounts I thought had been closed or paid off. My student loans, which I believed had been paid in full 2 years ago, were actually still active with a balance of $32,000. My mother had been taking my loan payments, the ones I dutifully handed her every month because she said she would handle the transfers, and pocketing the money while the interest accumulated. There was more. Rent payments from when I had lived at home after college, saving money for a down payment on a car. I had paid my mother $600 a month for 2 years. She told me she was putting it into a savings account for me. That account did not exist. The $14,400 had vanished. And my first car, the little blue sedan I had saved for and bought when I was 23. After a year, my mother called me in tears saying the car had been totaled while she borrowed it for errands. She said insurance would not cover it because of some technicality. I had mourned that car and taken the bus to work for 6 months while I saved for another one. The car had never been totaled. She had sold it for $8,500 cash and kept every penny. The total amount Patricia had stolen from me over the years was $93,900. I had documentation for every single transaction, every forged signature, every lie, and I had already called the police. Detective Morris and Officer Bradley were on their way. The color drained from my mother's face. Amber started crying. Real tears now, not the fake theatrical ones from earlier. Derek looked like he might throw up. His parents looked devastated, betrayed by the man they had raised. The wedding coordinator, a competent woman named Helen, stepped forward and said she needed to make something clear. She said Patricia had tried to cancel all the wedding vendors the previous week, claiming I had called off the wedding. She had requested all deposits and payments be refunded to Patricia's account. But Helen had found it suspicious, because I had not contacted her directly, and it was my name on the contract, not my mother's. Helen had frozen everything and called me to verify. That was how I learned what Patricia was planning. Helen looked at me with something like admiration and said she had never seen anything like this in 20 years of coordinating weddings. She asked if I needed anything, if there was anything she could do. I thanked her and said the police would handle it from here. Sarah and Lauren moved to stand on either side of me, their presence solid and reassuring. They had been documenting strange behavior from Patricia for weeks, they said. They had noticed her trying to access my apartment when I was not home, noticed her making phone calls and hiding the screen when they walked by. They had been keeping notes, just in case, because something felt wrong. I had the best friends in the world, I realized, and I had been so focused on my fake family and fake fiancé that I had almost forgotten that. The police arrived within 15 minutes. Detective Morris was a tall woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. Officer Bradley was younger, maybe early 30s, and he carried a tablet for taking notes. They walked into the ballroom, and the authority they carried made everyone go silent immediately. Patricia tried to take control of the situation the moment they entered. She pointed at me and said I was mentally unstable, that I had always been jealous of my sister, that I was making false accusations because I could not handle rejection. She put on a performance, her voice breaking with fake emotion, saying she was a devoted mother who had sacrificed everything for her daughters. I did not say a word. I just handed Detective Morris the folder I had prepared with Mr. Harrison's help. Inside were printed bank statements, copies of forged documents, screenshots of text messages between Patricia and a man I had never heard of, someone named Gary. The texts detailed their plans to run away together using my money. There were messages about booking flights to Costa Rica, about the beach house they would rent, about the new life they would start once they had drained me dry. Detective Morris flipped through the folder, her expression growing darker with each page. She asked Patricia if she would like to make a statement. Patricia refused, demanding a lawyer. That was smart of her. Probably the only smart thing she did that night. Amber, on the other hand, cracked immediately. She started talking without anyone even asking her questions. She admitted she knew about some of the theft, but stayed quiet because Patricia had promised her half the money. She said she was tired of being broke, tired of working dead-end jobs, tired of watching me have stability and success while she struggled. She thought this was her way out. The detective asked Amber how long she had known. Amber said about 4 months. She said Patricia had approached her with the plan after Derek confided in Patricia that he was having doubts about the marriage. Patricia saw an opportunity and ran with it. The plan was always to humiliate me so thoroughly that I would disappear from their lives and never question where the money went. Derek tried to leave. He actually took several steps toward the door before his own father blocked his path. Thomas's face was red with shame and anger. He said his son was not going anywhere until this was sorted out. Margaret was crying quietly, her hands shaking. She kept apologizing to me, saying she had no idea that she had raised him better than this. I told her it was not her fault. Derek made his own choices. He was a grown man who chose money and cruelty over decency. That was on him, not on her. Helen, the wedding coordinator, spoke up again. She said she needed to add something to the record. Patricia had not only tried to cancel the vendors, she had also tried to vandalize the ballroom. 2 nights ago, Patricia had shown up after hours, claiming she left her purse behind. The night security guard let her in, and she had attempted to pour red paint over the white chairs and carpet. Fortunately, the security guard noticed what she was doing and stopped her before much damage was done. He filed a report, but Helen had not wanted to upset me before the rehearsal. Helen handed Detective Morris a copy of that security report along with video footage from the ballroom's cameras. The detective added it to her growing file. More revelations came tumbling out as people started connecting pieces. My boss had called me 2 days earlier, concerned about some irregularities in the company files. Someone had tried to access client accounts using my login credentials and attempted to transfer funds. The IT department caught it immediately and traced the login to a volunteer who had been helping in the office, Patricia. She had been setting me up to take the fall for embezzlement at my own job. I had gone to my boss immediately, explained the situation with my mother, and cooperated fully with the internal investigation. HR had cleared me of any wrongdoing and banned Patricia from the building. My boss had wanted to press charges, but I asked him to wait until I had more evidence. Now I had it. The detective asked if there was anything else. I hesitated, then mentioned the man in the text messages, Gary. I said I had never met him, did not know who he was, but he seemed to be involved in my mother's plans. Officer Bradley pulled out his tablet and ran the name through their database. His eyebrows went up. He showed the screen to Detective Morris, who let out a low whistle. Gary Stevenson was wanted for fraud in Oregon and Nevada. He had a pattern of seducing women, convincing them to embezzle or steal from their employers, then disappearing with the money while the women took the fall. Patricia had apparently met him online 6 months ago. My mother had not just betrayed me. She had fallen for a con artist and was about to become his next victim. Part of me felt a flicker of vindication. A larger part of me just felt sad. Then my Aunt Catherine walked through the ballroom doors. I had not seen her in months, not since my father's funeral, and I had no idea why she was there. Catherine was my father's younger sister, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who worked as a forensic accountant. She had never liked Patricia, and the feeling was mutual. Catherine looked around the room, taking in the police presence and the tears and the chaos, and she nodded like this was exactly what she expected. She walked straight to Detective Morris and introduced herself. Then she said she had been investigating Patricia for months because she suspected Patricia had something to do with my father's death. The room went completely silent. Even Amber stopped crying. Catherine explained that my father, Robert, had died 3 years ago from what was ruled a sudden heart attack. He was only 52, had no history of heart problems, and had passed a physical exam 2 months before his death. Catherine had always found it suspicious, but she had no proof of anything wrong. Until now. Catherine had hired her own investigators and medical experts to review the circumstances of Robert's death. They found evidence that he had been slowly poisoned with digitalis, a substance derived from foxglove plants. Patricia had a garden full of foxglove in the backyard of their home. Medical records, when re-examined by a specialist, showed consistent signs of digitalis toxicity in the weeks leading up to Robert's death. Catherine had turned all of this evidence over to the district attorney's office. There was now an active murder investigation into my father's death. She had come to the rehearsal to tell me in person, not knowing she was walking into the middle of my own confrontation with Patricia. My mother's face went gray. She swayed on her feet, and Officer Bradley had to catch her arm to keep her from falling. Amber was staring at Patricia with absolute horror, like she was seeing her mother for the first time. Detective Morris asked Catherine to send her copies of everything she had. Catherine already had her phone out, forwarding files. The detective then informed Patricia that she was under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and she would also be questioned in connection with the death of Robert Hayes. Patricia would need to come to the station immediately. Amber was also placed under arrest as an accessory to fraud. She was read her rights while crying hysterically, saying she did not know about the murder. She never would have gone along with any of this if she knew. The officers did not look particularly sympathetic. Derek was not arrested because his involvement was a civil matter, not a criminal one. He had been promised money to participate in fraud, but he had not actually received any funds yet, and his role was primarily as a terrible human being rather than an actual criminal. His parents looked like they wanted to arrest him themselves. As Patricia and Amber were let out in handcuffs, Patricia finally broke. She screamed at me, saying this was all my fault, that I had always been ungrateful, that I had ruined everything. She said I should have just accepted my place in the family and none of this would have happened. I did not respond. There was nothing to say to someone like that. The police took them away, and the ballroom felt lighter, like a poison had been extracted. The rehearsal that was supposed to prepare me for my wedding instead became the night my entire life changed. After the police left with Patricia and Amber, the remaining guests did not know what to do. Helen, the coordinator, suggested everyone go home and take some time to process what had happened. She said she would hold all the wedding arrangements in place for 30 days in case I decided to move forward, though she completely understood if I wanted to cancel everything. I thanked her and said I would let her know. In that moment, standing in the ballroom surrounded by overturned chairs and shocked faces, I had no idea what I wanted. Derek tried one more time to approach me. His parents had stepped away to make phone calls, probably to their lawyer, and he saw his chance. He started to say something about how this got out of hand, how he never meant for things to go this far, how maybe we could talk about this. Sarah stepped between us before I could even respond. Her voice was ice cold when she told Derek that if he ever came near me again, she would make sure every person in this town knew exactly what kind of man he was. Lauren added that she had already started posting the story on social media, without names but with enough details that people who knew us would figure it out quickly. Derek's face went pale. He backed away and practically ran out of the ballroom. His parents followed shortly after, but not before Margaret hugged me tight and whispered that she was so sorry. Thomas shook his head and said they had raised a coward and they would make sure Derek faced consequences, even if those consequences were just being cut off from the family. I went home that night to my apartment, which suddenly felt like a crime scene. My mother had been in here, had gone through my things, had stolen my dress from my closet. I looked around at the space I had thought was safe and realized nothing had been safe for a long time. Catherine came home with me. She said she was not leaving me alone, and she set up camp on my couch. Sarah and Lauren stayed too, the four of us sitting in my living room at midnight, drinking tea and trying to make sense of what had happened. Catherine told me more about my father. She said Robert had known something was wrong with Patricia for years, but stayed because he was worried about what would happen to Amber and me if he left. He had been documenting Patricia's behavior, keeping records of her spending habits and her lies. He suspected she was stealing from him but could never prove it. The life insurance policy he had was for $500,000, with me as the sole beneficiary, specifically to keep Patricia from getting the money. Patricia had tried to contest the will after Robert's death, claiming she deserved the insurance money as his widow, but Robert's lawyer had ironclad documentation showing that Robert wanted me to have it. Patricia got the house and Robert's retirement account, which was about $200,000. Apparently that was not enough for her. Catherine said Robert had loved me more than anything in the world. He had been so proud of me, of my career and my independence. He just never knew how to protect me from Patricia while he was alive. So he did his best to protect me after he was gone. I cried then, for the first time that night. I cried for my father, who had tried so hard. I cried for the years of abuse I had normalized. I cried for the wedding that would never happen, and the family I never really had. Sarah and Lauren held me while Catherine stroked my hair and told me I was going to be okay, that I was stronger than I knew. The next morning, news spread through our town like wildfire. We lived in a community of about 30,000 people, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. By noon, my phone was flooded with messages. Some were from concerned friends and acquaintances. Others were from people I barely knew, offering support or asking for details. My workplace rallied around me in a way that left me speechless. My boss, Richard, called me personally and told me to take as much paid leave as I needed. He said the company stood behind me 100%, and they were prepared to cooperate fully with any legal proceedings. My coworkers sent flowers and cards. My assistant took over my client accounts without being asked and sent me daily updates so I would not fall behind. Derek tried to reach out via text. He sent a long message claiming he had been manipulated by Patricia, that he really did love me once, that he made a terrible mistake. I blocked his number without responding. He tried calling from different numbers. I blocked those too. He tried reaching out through mutual friends, but they all shut him down. His reputation in town was destroyed within 48 hours. People who had known him for years turned their backs. His employer called him in for a meeting about ethics violations, and he was fired by the end of the week. His parents publicly disowned him in a statement to the local newspaper, saying they could not support someone who had acted with such cruelty and dishonesty. I hired a lawyer, the same Mr. Harrison, who had worked as my private investigator. He was also licensed to practice law, and he took my case personally. We filed civil suits against Patricia, Amber, and Derek for fraud, emotional distress, and breach of contract. Mr. Harrison said we had one of the strongest cases he had ever seen. More details about Patricia's schemes emerged as the investigation continued. She had been running small scams on elderly neighbors for years, offering to help with their bills and shopping, then overcharging them and pocketing the difference. She had taken out 3 credit cards in my name without my knowledge, maxing them out and destroying my credit score. She had even tried to take out a life insurance policy on me with herself as the beneficiary, but fortunately the insurance company required my signature and I never saw the paperwork. The wedding dress was recovered from Amber's apartment, though it had been damaged. Amber had apparently spilled wine on it in a fit of rage after being arrested. The boutique owner, a kind woman named Clara, heard about what happened and reached out to me. She said she would restore the dress for free if I wanted, or she would buy it back from me for the full price I paid if I could not stand to look at it anymore. I thanked her and said I needed time to decide. The truth was, I did not know if I could ever wear that dress now. It represented so much pain and betrayal, but it also represented the craftsmanship of someone who had worked hard to make something beautiful for me. I told Clara I would let her know. The community support was overwhelming. People I barely knew offered help, donations, words of encouragement. Someone started a crowdfunding campaign to help with my legal fees, even though I did not ask for it. It raised $12,000 in 3 days before I asked them to close it and donate the money to a domestic violence shelter instead. Catherine stayed with me for 2 weeks, helping me sort through the practical matters of pressing charges and filing lawsuits and changing all my passwords and account numbers. She helped me request my credit reports and start the long process of disputing fraudulent accounts. She helped me install new locks on my apartment and set up a security system. Most importantly, she helped me start therapy. Catherine found me a counselor who specialized in family trauma and financial abuse. Her name was Dr. Ellen Morrison, and she was in her 60s with kind eyes and a direct manner that I appreciated. In our first session, Dr. Morrison asked me to describe my relationship with my mother. 2 hours later, I was still talking, unpacking years of emotional abuse and gaslighting that I had never recognized as abuse. Dr. Morrison helped me see patterns I had been blind to. The way Patricia always made me feel like I owed her something. The way she compared me to Amber constantly, ensuring I always felt inadequate. The way she isolated me from my father, making me think he was disappointed in me when the opposite was true. The way she trained me to accept terrible treatment as normal, so I would not recognize it when Derek and Amber betrayed me. I started going to therapy twice a week. It was hard work, confronting all the ways I had been conditioned to doubt myself and accept cruelty as love, but it was also freeing. For the first time in my life, I started to understand that none of this was my fault. 3 weeks after the disastrous rehearsal, Amber's lawyer reached out to Mr. Harrison with a plea deal offer. Amber would testify against Patricia in exchange for a reduced sentence. She was facing up to 15 years for her role in the fraud. With the plea deal, she might get as little as 5 years with possibility of parole in 3. Mr. Harrison asked what I thought. I said I wanted Amber to face consequences, but I also believed she had been manipulated by Patricia for most of her life, just like I had. If her testimony helped convict Patricia for murder, then the plea deal was worth it. The deal was accepted. Amber would plead guilty to fraud and accessory charges and testify fully about everything Patricia had done. Meanwhile, Patricia sat in jail unable to make bail. The judge had set it at $500,000, which she could not pay because all her assets were frozen pending the investigation. She tried to get Amber to bail her out, but Amber had no money. She tried to call me, leaving voicemail messages that ranged from apologetic to furious to manipulative. I never answered. Mr. Oliver got the 7. Harrison advised me to save all the messages as evidence of her continued attempts to control and intimidate me. Catherine found something else while going through my father's papers. A safety deposit box registered in my name at a bank I had never used. Catherine had the key, which Robert had given her before he died with instructions to give it to me when the time was right. She had been waiting for me to be ready, and she decided that time was now. We went to the bank together on a cold Tuesday morning. The box was small, about the size of a shoebox. Inside were letters, dozens of them, addressed to me in my father's handwriting. There was also a bank statement showing an account I did not know existed, a trust fund with my name on it containing $200,000, and there was a thick folder labeled Evidence. I sat in the bank's private viewing room and read my father's letters. He had been writing to me for years, documenting his love and his pride and his fears for my future. He wrote about the first time he held me as a baby, about teaching me to ride a bike, about watching me graduate college. He wrote about how worried he was about Patricia's behavior, how he saw her cruelty toward me and felt powerless to stop it without destroying our family completely. He wrote about his suspicions that Patricia was poisoning him. He had started feeling ill about 2 months before he died, and his doctor could not figure out what was wrong. Blood tests came back inconclusive. He felt weak and nauseous. His heart would race randomly, and he had trouble sleeping. He researched his symptoms and found they matched digitalis poisoning. He had noticed Patricia making tea for him every night, insisting he drink it for his health. He started secretly dumping the tea, and his symptoms improved slightly, but by then the damage was done. He wrote that he loved me, that he was proud of me, that I should never doubt my worth. He said if I was reading this letter, it meant he was gone, and he was sorry he could not protect me better. But he had left me everything he could to give me a fighting chance. Money that Patricia could not touch, evidence that would prove what she had done, and the truth about how much he loved me. I sobbed in that bank viewing room, clutching the letters to my chest. Catherine held me and cried with me. My father had known he was being murdered, and he had spent his last weeks making sure I would be okay without him. The trust fund was his way of ensuring I would never be dependent on Patricia. The evidence folder contained years of documentation, bank statements showing Patricia's theft, emails between Patricia and Gary that went back further than anyone realized, even photos of the foxglove garden, with notes about how Patricia had researched which parts of the plant were most toxic. This evidence would seal Patricia's fate. Catherine had already shared copies with the district attorney, but now we had the originals, in my father's own hand, with his own notations. The murder case went from strong to unbeatable. I took the letters home and read them all again that night. My father's voice came through so clearly in his writing, warm and loving and desperately sad. He apologized over and over for not being stronger, for not leaving Patricia sooner, for not protecting me better, but he did not need to apologize. He had given me the greatest gift possible, the truth and the means to seek justice. 3 months after that devastating rehearsal, my life looked completely different. Patricia and Amber were both in jail awaiting trial. Patricia could not make bail, and Amber's bail had been revoked after she violated the conditions by trying to contact witnesses. Derek had completely disappeared from town, and rumors said he was working at a fast food restaurant in another state, living in a cheap apartment, his pharmaceutical sales career destroyed beyond repair. As for me, I was healing. Slowly, painfully, but genuinely healing. The murder investigation into my father's death found conclusive evidence that Patricia had been poisoning him with digitalis extracted from the foxglove plants in her garden. Forensic analysis of his medical records showed a clear pattern of toxic exposure in the months before his death. The final dose had been large enough to trigger the fatal heart attack. Patricia would face first-degree murder charges in addition to all the fraud and embezzlement charges. I attended every court hearing. I sat in the gallery and watched Patricia try to maintain her innocent victim act, but it crumbled more with each appearance. The evidence was overwhelming. Her lawyer looked increasingly defeated. During one hearing, Patricia turned around in her seat and stared directly at me. Her eyes were full of hatred, pure and undiluted. She mouthed words I could not quite make out, but I did not need to. I knew she was blaming me, cursing me, wishing I had never been born. I stared back at her with calm, steady eyes until she looked away first. Amber's situation was different. She had taken the plea deal and was cooperating fully with prosecutors. In a supervised meeting arranged through our lawyers, Amber asked to speak with me. I almost said no, but Dr. Morrison encouraged me to hear her out, saying it might help with closure. We met in a small conference room at the courthouse. Amber looked terrible. She had lost weight, her hair was limp and unwashed, and she had dark circles under her eyes. She was not the beautiful, confident woman who had walked into my rehearsal wearing my dress. She looked broken. She apologized. She cried and told me she was so sorry, that she had been jealous of me her entire life, that Patricia had fed that jealousy and encouraged the competition between us. She said she knew it was not an excuse, that she had made her own terrible choices, but she wanted me to know that somewhere under all the damage, she had loved me once. She did not expect forgiveness. She just wanted me to know the truth. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I told her that I appreciated the apology, but I was not ready to forgive her yet. Maybe someday, but not now. The wounds were too fresh and the betrayal too deep. But I also told her that I hoped she would use her time in prison to get therapy, to work on herself, to become someone better than the person Patricia raised her to be. She nodded and thanked me for even listening. That was the last time I saw her before her sentencing. My therapy with Dr. Morrison continued twice a week. We worked through decades of conditioning, peeling back layers of self-doubt and shame that Patricia had built into my identity. Dr. Morrison helped me recognize patterns of behavior I had learned, like always apologizing even when I did nothing wrong, like minimizing my achievements so others would not feel threatened, like accepting crumbs of affection and calling it love. She taught me that healing was not linear. Some days I felt strong and clear-headed. Other days I was angry or sad or confused. All of it was normal. All of it was part of the process. Sarah and Lauren were constants in my life through all of this. They took turns staying at my apartment when the nightmares got bad. They went with me to court hearings for moral support. They helped me sort through wedding gifts that had started arriving before people heard what happened, returning them with polite notes explaining the wedding was canceled. They sat with me while I called vendors and canceled everything: the caterer, the florist, the photographer, the band. Helen, the wedding coordinator, refused to charge me a cancellation fee. She said what happened to me was extraordinary circumstances, and she would not profit from my pain. She also said the offer to hold the venue for 30 days still stood if I changed my mind about anything. I thanked her but said I could not imagine getting married now. The whole concept of weddings felt tainted. She understood. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into a major campaign for a nonprofit client, a women's shelter that helped survivors of domestic violence. The irony was not lost on me. I poured everything I had learned and felt into that campaign, creating messaging that was raw and honest and powerful. The campaign went viral. It reached millions of people across social media, television, and print media. Donations to the shelter increased by 400%. Other organizations reached out wanting to work with our firm. My boss Richard called me into his office and told me he was promoting me to senior marketing director, effective immediately. The raise was substantial, and the new position came with a team of 12 people reporting to me. I cried in his office, overwhelmed by everything. Richard handed me tissues and said I deserved every bit of success that came my way. He said I had shown incredible strength and professionalism through an impossible situation, and he was honored to have me leading his marketing department. The civil lawsuits moved forward. Mr. Harrison was relentless. He filed motions, subpoenaed records, and built cases against Patricia, Amber, and Derek that were absolutely airtight. Patricia's assets were seized. The house she had inherited from my father, her car, her bank accounts, everything was frozen pending the outcome of the trials. Derek tried to settle out of court, offering to pay me $50,000 to drop the lawsuit. Mr. Harrison laughed and countered with $250,000 plus a public apology. Derek's lawyer said his client did not have that kind of money. Mr. Harrison said then Derek should not have committed fraud. We would see him in court. The dress situation resolved itself in an unexpected way. Clara, the boutique owner, called and said she had an idea. Instead of selling the dress back to her or having it restored for me to wear, what if we auctioned it for charity? She said my story had touched a lot of people in the community, and she believed we could raise significant money for a good cause. I loved the idea. We decided to auction the dress and donate all proceeds to the women's shelter I had just created a campaign for. Clara cleaned and repaired the dress as much as possible, and we organized an online auction. The bidding was fierce. Women from across the country wanted to support the cause and own a piece of the story. The final bid was $12,000, $4,000 more than I had originally paid for the dress. The buyer was a woman in California who had survived similar family trauma. She planned to wear the dress to renew her vows with her husband of 20 years, transforming it from a symbol of betrayal into a symbol of survival and hope. I cried when I read her message explaining why she wanted it. I started a blog called Recognizing Financial Abuse in Families. I wrote about my experiences, about the warning signs I had missed, about how family members can use money and guilt to control you. I wrote about Patricia's tactics and how common they were. I wrote about how to protect yourself, how to document everything, how to seek help. The blog took off. Within 2 months, I had 50,000 followers. People shared their own stories in the comments, and a community formed around supporting each other and recognizing abuse. Other survivors reached out asking for advice. I could not help everyone individually, but I compiled resources and connected people with professionals who could help. One evening, about 4 months after the rehearsal, I received a message through the blog. It was from a man named Colin. He said he had read my entire blog in one sitting and felt like I was describing his own life. He had been engaged to a woman whose family had systematically drained him financially and emotionally. When he finally woke up to what was happening and tried to leave, they destroyed his credit, his reputation, and almost his will to live. But he had rebuilt. He was now an architect, living 2 hours away, had been in therapy for 3 years, and had his life back on track. He said he did not reach out looking for anything except to say thank you. My words had helped him feel less alone, less ashamed of what happened to him. He wanted me to know that what I was doing mattered. I responded, thanking him for sharing his story. We started messaging back and forth, just occasional conversations about recovery and healing and rebuilding. He was easy to talk to, thoughtful and kind. After a few weeks, we moved to video calls. Colin was in his early 30s with dark hair and warm brown eyes. He had a gentle smile and a quiet way of speaking that put me at ease immediately. We talked about everything. Our families, our careers, our fears about trusting people again. He told me about his ex-fiancée, Rachel, and her family who had convinced him to take out loans in his name for their business ventures that never materialized. By the time he realized what was happening, he was $90,000 in debt and they had vanished with all the money. He had spent 3 years digging out of that hole, working 2 jobs, living in a tiny apartment, rebuilding his credit point by point. He went to therapy to process the betrayal and learn how to recognize red flags. He was careful now, cautious, but he was not broken. He had built a good life for himself. I admired his resilience. And I realized, slowly, that I was looking forward to our video calls more than anything else in my week. He made me laugh. He listened without judgment. He understood what I had been through, because he had been through something similar. There was no pretense between us, no games, just honest conversation between 2 people who had survived something terrible. After 2 months of talking, Colin asked if he could drive down to meet me in person. "Just coffee," he said. "No pressure, only if I was comfortable." My heart raced when I read the message. I had not been on a date since Derek. I had not even thought about dating, but this did not feel like a date. It felt like meeting someone I already knew, someone safe. I said yes. We met at a coffee shop downtown on a Saturday afternoon. I was nervous, but the moment I saw him walk through the door, the nervousness faded. He looked just like his video calls, maybe a bit taller than I expected, and he had the same warm smile. We talked for 4 hours straight, until the coffee shop closed and we had to leave. Then we walked through the downtown area, talking for another 2 hours until the sun set. It was the easiest conversation I had ever had. There were no awkward silences, no trying to impress each other, no hidden agendas, just 2 people who understood each other, sharing space and time together. Before he drove home, Colin hugged me goodbye. It was a simple hug, nothing romantic, just friendly and warm. But it felt safe, in a way I had forgotten was possible. He said he would like to see me again if I was interested. I said I was very interested. We started seeing each other every weekend. Sometimes he drove to my town, sometimes I drove to his. We took things slow, both of us careful with our healing hearts. We went to museums and parks, tried new restaurants, watched movies at his apartment or mine. He met Sarah and Lauren, who interrogated him thoroughly and then gave me enthusiastic approval. I met his parents and sister, who welcomed me with open arms and told me stories about Colin as a kid that made him blush. Colin was everything Derek was not. He was transparent about his feelings, his past, his finances. He encouraged me to keep going to therapy and went to his own sessions regularly. He respected my boundaries without me even having to state them. He celebrated my successes without feeling threatened. He was patient with my bad days and present for my good days. I was not ready to call him my boyfriend yet. That word felt loaded with too much history. But he was becoming my best friend, my confidant, the person I wanted to share good news with first. And that felt like a solid foundation for whatever came next. 6 months after the rehearsal that changed everything, Patricia's trial began. The courtroom was packed with journalists, curious onlookers, and people who had been affected by Patricia's schemes. My elderly neighbors who had been scammed testified. Business owners who had been defrauded testified. The insurance company representative testified about the attempted policy on my life. And I testified. I sat in the witness box and told the jury everything. I described growing up with Patricia's constant criticism and manipulation. I detailed the financial abuse, the stolen money, the forged documents. I explained how I hired the private investigator and what we found. I read excerpts from my father's letters, my voice breaking as I shared his words about loving me and fearing for my safety. Patricia's lawyer tried to discredit me. He suggested I was an ungrateful daughter who resented my mother's relationship with my sister. He implied I had fabricated evidence out of spite, but Mr. Harrison was ready. He presented bank records, video footage, audio recordings, testimony from dozens of witnesses. The evidence was so overwhelming that even Patricia's lawyer seemed to give up halfway through. The murder charges were the most serious. The prosecution brought in medical experts who explained how digitalis poisoning works, how it accumulates in the body over time, how Patricia had carefully dosed my father to make his death look natural. They showed the jury photos of Patricia's garden with the foxglove plants clearly visible. They presented my father's documentation of his symptoms and his suspicions. Catherine testified about her investigation and her relationship with her brother. She described Robert as a kind, gentle man who loved his daughter more than anything. She explained how he had confided in her about his fears regarding Patricia, but felt trapped in the marriage. When the prosecutor asked why Robert did not just leave, Catherine said he worried that Patricia would hurt me if he tried to take me away from her. So he stayed and tried to protect me as best he could, even as it cost him his life. The jury was visibly moved. Several jurors wiped their eyes. Patricia sat at the defense table looking defiant, but I could see cracks in her composure. Her hands shook. Her jaw was tight. She was losing, and she knew it. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found Patricia guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and a dozen other charges. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. At the sentencing hearing, I was allowed to give a victim impact statement. I stood before the court and spoke directly to the judge, though my words were really for Patricia. I told the judge about the lifetime of emotional abuse, about being raised to believe I was worthless, about the years of theft and manipulation. I talked about my father and how much I missed him, how Patricia had stolen not just his life but also my chance to have more time with him. Then I turned and looked at Patricia directly. I told her that she had tried to break me, but she failed. I told her that I had built a good life, despite her best efforts to destroy me. I told her that I forgave my father for not being able to protect me better, but I would never forgive her for killing him. I told her that I hoped she spent every day of her prison sentence thinking about what she had done and who she had become. Patricia stared at me with empty eyes. No remorse, no emotion, nothing. She was exactly who she had always been. A woman incapable of love or empathy, driven only by greed and the need to control others. The judge sentenced Patricia to 30 years to life for murder, plus an additional 25 years for the fraud and related charges, to be served consecutively. Patricia would be in her 90s before she was even eligible for parole. She would almost certainly die in prison. As they led her away, Patricia looked back at me one final time. I met her gaze steadily, calmly. I had no more fear of her. She had no power over me anymore. I watched her disappear through the courtroom doors and felt a weight lift from my chest that I had been carrying my entire life. Amber's trial was simpler. She had already pleaded guilty as part of her deal. The sentencing hearing was brief. She received 5 years for fraud and accessory charges, with the possibility of parole after serving 3 years if she maintained good behavior and completed rehabilitation programs. Before Amber was taken away, she asked to speak to me one more time. We met in the same courthouse conference room as before, with our lawyers present. Amber looked healthier than last time, like prison had actually been good for her in some ways. She had gained back the weight she lost, and there was clarity in her eyes that had not been there before. She told me she had been in therapy twice a week since being incarcerated. She was finally unpacking all the damage Patricia had done to both of us, finally seeing how we had been pitted against each other our whole lives. She said she understood now that Patricia was a narcissist who could not love anyone, and she had used both of us for her own purposes in different ways. Amber said she took full responsibility for her actions. She could have chosen differently. She could have warned me instead of participating in the betrayal. She made terrible choices, and she would live with those consequences. But she wanted me to know that she was working on becoming a better person. She was taking college classes in prison. She was learning accounting because she wanted to help other survivors of financial abuse when she got out. I told Amber that I appreciated her efforts to change. I said I was not ready to rebuild a sisterly relationship, and I might never be ready for that. But I could be open to the possibility of some kind of connection in the future after she served her time and proved through actions that she had truly changed. Words were easy. Consistent changed behavior over time was what would matter. She nodded and thanked me for even considering it. That was enough for her. As they led her away, she looked back and said, "One more thing. Daddy would be proud of you." Then she was gone. The civil lawsuits concluded shortly after. Patricia had no assets left to seize beyond what had already been taken, but the judgment against her was official. $120,000 in damages to be paid to me. Derek settled out of court for $75,000. After his lawyer convinced him he would lose much more if it went to trial. His parents paid the settlement because Derek himself had no money. They made it clear they were paying to end the family's public humiliation, not because they felt Derek deserved help. With the settlement money, my father's trust fund, and my promotion at work, I was financially secure for the first time in my life. I could have bought a luxury car or taken an expensive vacation. Instead, I bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood. It was nothing fancy, just a 3-bedroom ranch with a little yard and a front porch. But it was mine. My name on the deed, my mortgage, my space that no one could invade or steal from me. Colin helped me move in. He took a weekend off work and drove down with a truck full of his tools. He helped me paint the walls, install new light fixtures, and build a bookshelf for the living room. Sarah and Lauren came over with takeout food and wine, and we sat on the floor of my empty living room toasting to new beginnings. Over the next few months, I slowly made the house into a home. I decorated carefully, choosing things I actually liked instead of things I thought I should like. I set up a home office for my blog work. I planted a small garden in the backyard, deliberately choosing flowers that were not foxglove. Colin and I had been dating for 6 months by then. We still took things slow, but we had fallen into an easy rhythm. He stayed over some weekends. I stayed at his place other weekends. We talked about the future in careful, hypothetical terms, testing out ideas without committing to anything too quickly. He met Aunt Catherine, who examined him with the same thoroughness she applied to financial audits. After 2 hours of conversation, Catherine pulled me aside and said Colin was good people, the real deal. That meant the world to me because Catherine had never liked Derek, had told me from the beginning that something felt off about him. I should have listened to her instincts then. I listened to them now. Colin introduced me to his family at a casual backyard barbecue. His parents, Linda and Frank, were warm and welcoming without being overwhelming. His sister Amy was funny and down to earth. His nephew and niece, ages 7 and 9, were energetic and adorable. They treated me like I had always been part of the family, no awkwardness or judgment. The contrast to my own family was so stark it made my chest ache, but in a good way. This was what family was supposed to feel like. On the 1-year anniversary of the disastrous rehearsal, Colin surprised me. He picked me up in the morning and told me to dress nicely but comfortably. He drove us to the same venue where the rehearsal had happened, and I felt my stomach drop. I asked him what we were doing here, whether this was a good idea. He took my hand and said, "Trust me." We walked into the ballroom and I gasped. It had been transformed. The space was decorated with simple, elegant touches. White lights strung across the ceiling, small bouquets of wildflowers on tables, soft music playing. Sarah, Lauren, and Catherine were there, dressed in pretty sundresses and wearing huge smiles. Colin explained that he had coordinated with them to throw me a freedom party. Not a celebration of the betrayal, but a celebration of me surviving it, thriving after it, becoming stronger because of it. There was a cake decorated with the words, "Here's to new beginnings." There was champagne. There were speeches. Sarah talked about how proud she was of me, how she had watched me go from devastated to determined to triumphant. Lauren talked about my strength and resilience, about how I had turned my pain into purpose with the blog and the advocacy work. Catherine talked about her brother, my father, and how he would be bursting with pride if he could see the woman I had become. Then Colin spoke. He said he felt incredibly lucky to know me, to be part of my life. He said I had taught him that healing was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, that love did not have to be complicated or painful. He said he was not proposing or making any grand declarations. He just wanted me to know that he was here, he was steady, and he was not going anywhere. I cried. I cried happy tears for the first time in what felt like forever. I looked around at the people in that room, the people who genuinely loved me and supported me, and I realized this was what family was supposed to be. Not blood and obligation and manipulation, but choice and care and showing up for each other. We danced to the music, ate cake, drank champagne, and laughed until our sides hurt. Catherine told embarrassing stories about my father that made me laugh and cry at the same time. Sarah and Lauren recounted the early days after the rehearsal when they had to force me to eat and sleep. Colin just held my hand and smiled, happy to be included in this moment of celebration. As the evening wound down, I stood in the center of that ballroom that had once been the site of my greatest humiliation. But it did not feel like that anymore. The bad memories had been overwritten with good ones. The space had been reclaimed. I had been reclaimed. I thanked everyone for coming, for loving me, for believing in me, even when I struggled to believe in myself. I told them that this past year had been the hardest of my life, but also the most transformative. I said I would not wish what happened to me on anyone, but I also would not trade the person I had become for anything. Colin drove me home that night, both of us tired and happy. He walked me to my door and kissed me goodnight, a sweet, gentle kiss that promised nothing except more moments like this one. I went inside my little house, my safe space, and sat in the quiet for a long time. I felt at peace in a way I never had before. The past was behind me. The future was wide open. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. 2 years have passed since that rehearsal day. 2 years since my world fell apart and I had to rebuild myself from the ground up. Looking back now, I can see how far I have come, how much I have changed. I am 30 years old now and head of marketing at my firm. I lead a team of 12 talented people, and our department has won multiple awards for innovative campaigns. My salary has doubled since my promotion. I own my home outright, after using part of my settlement money to pay off the mortgage early. I am financially stable, professionally successful, and emotionally healthy. Patricia tried to break me, but instead she freed me. The blog I started evolved into something bigger than I ever imagined. Last year, a publisher reached out asking if I would write a book about financial abuse and family trauma recovery. I spent 6 months writing it, pouring every lesson I learned onto those pages. The book came out 3 months ago and immediately hit bestseller lists. I have been invited to speak at conferences, universities, and women's shelters across the country. I share my story and help others recognize the warning signs of financial and emotional abuse. The speaking events are both exhausting and fulfilling. I meet survivors who are just starting their healing journeys, who are where I was 2 years ago, scared, angry, confused, ashamed. I tell them what I wish someone had told me. It is not your fault. You are not crazy. You deserve better. You can rebuild. I share practical advice about documenting abuse, protecting your finances, building a support system, and knowing when to walk away. After each event, people line up to talk to me. They share their stories, ask for advice, sometimes just cry and hug me. One woman told me my book saved her life because it helped her recognize that her mother was slowly poisoning her, just like Patricia poisoned my father. She got medical help in time and her mother is now facing charges. Another woman said my blog helped her escape a fiancé whose family was draining her savings account. She got out before they destroyed her financially. These conversations remind me why the pain was worth it. My suffering became a roadmap for others to find their way out. My story gave people permission to acknowledge their own trauma and seek help. That is a gift I never expected. Amber was released on parole 3 weeks ago after serving 3 years of her 5-year sentence. She maintained perfect behavior in prison, completed every rehabilitation program offered, and earned an associate degree in accounting. Her parole officer says she is a model parolee, attends therapy, works full-time at a nonprofit that helps formerly incarcerated women, volunteers at a financial literacy program. Amber reached out asking if we could meet. I thought about it for a week before agreeing. We met at a neutral coffee shop with our therapists present. She looked completely different, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, wearing conservative clothes that actually covered her body. She looked like a serious, responsible adult, not the attention-seeking woman-child I remembered. She did not ask for forgiveness. She did not make excuses. She simply told me what she was doing with her life now, and acknowledged that she might never earn back my trust. She said she understood if I never wanted a relationship with her, but she hoped I could at least believe that she was genuinely trying to be a better person. I told her the truth. I did not trust her yet, and I might never trust her the way sisters are supposed to trust each other, but I could see she was trying, and I respected that. We have started meeting once a month for supervised coffee meetings with our therapists. We talk about our separate lives, our therapy progress, our careers. It is awkward and careful, but it is something. Maybe someday it will become more. Maybe it will not. I am okay either way. Patricia is in prison and will remain there for the rest of her life. She will be 93 years old before she is eligible for parole, and even then she is unlikely to be granted it. She has shown no remorse, no recognition of her crimes. She writes me letters occasionally, which I do not read. My lawyer screens them and keeps them on file in case they contain threats, but mostly she just rambles about how unfair her treatment is and how everyone betrayed her. I do not visit her. I do not think about her unless I have to. She is a cautionary tale in my presentations, a clinical case study in narcissistic personality disorder in my therapy sessions, and nothing more. She has no power over my emotions anymore. That, more than anything, is how I know I have truly healed. Derek is a distant memory. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he moved across the country and got remarried last year. His new wife apparently has no idea about his past. Part of me feels sorry for her. Part of me knows she will figure it out eventually, the same way I did. People like Derek do not change without serious intervention, and he never sought therapy or took accountability for his actions. I do not wish him ill. I do not wish him well. I simply do not wish anything for him because he is irrelevant to my life. That indifference, that complete absence of emotional charge, is the truest sign that I have moved on. As for Colin, we got engaged 6 months ago. He proposed in the most perfectly Colin way possible. During a quiet evening in my backyard garden, just the two of us, no big production or grand gesture. He told me he loved me, that he wanted to build a life together, that he would never take my trust for granted. He presented a simple engagement ring that he designed himself, incorporating elements that were meaningful to both of us. I said yes, without hesitation. Not because I needed to get married or prove anything, but because Colin is my partner in the truest sense. He is safe and steady and completely transparent. We have built our relationship on honesty, communication, and mutual respect. We go to couples therapy together, Not because we have problems, but because we believe in maintaining healthy relationship skills. We are planning a small wedding next spring, just 20 people in Catherine's garden, focused entirely on love and commitment rather than spectacle. I will wear a simple sundress, not a wedding gown. I have learned that the ceremony does not matter nearly as much as the person you are committing to. Catherine will walk me down the aisle since my father cannot. Sarah and Lauren will stand beside me. Colin's sister will stand beside him. We will say vows we wrote ourselves, have a casual dinner with our favorite people, and dance in the garden until the stars come out. That is the wedding I actually want. Not the grand production I planned 2 years ago, which was more about proving something to my family than celebrating love. This will be real and intimate and perfectly us. In my vows, I plan to talk about what I have learned about love. Real love does not come with conditions or competitions. Real love does not require you to be smaller so someone else can feel bigger. Real love is safe and honest and supportive. Real love celebrates your successes instead of resenting them. Real love does not keep score or hold grudges. Real love gives you space to heal and grow and become your best self. I found that love with Colin, but more importantly, I found it with myself first. I learned to love the person I am, flaws and trauma and all. I learned that I am worthy of good things, even when my own mother could not see my worth. I learned that family is not just who you are born to, but who chooses to show up for you consistently, who celebrates your joy instead of trying to steal it. The greatest lesson I learned from this nightmare is that betrayal from family cuts deepest because we are conditioned from childhood to accept their treatment as love. We normalize abuse when it comes from parents or siblings because society tells us family is everything, family always loves you, blood is thicker than water, but that is not always true. Sometimes blood is poison. Sometimes the family you are born into is the family you need to walk away from to survive. I want anyone listening to my story to understand this. If someone in your family makes you feel small, unworthy, or constantly in competition, trust that instinct. If someone who claims to love you is draining you financially, emotionally, or both, that is abuse, even if they call it love. You have the right to protect yourself. You have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to walk away. Document everything. Keep records of all financial transactions. Save text messages and emails. Take screenshots. Get evidence before you confront anyone because people like Patricia will lie and manipulate and try to make you look crazy. Having documentation is your protection. Protect yourself financially and legally. Keep separate bank accounts that no family members have access to. Check your credit reports regularly for accounts you did not open. Change passwords frequently. Never give anyone power of attorney unless you have multiple safeguards in place. Build a support system outside your family. Cultivate friendships with people who are healthy and supportive. Find mentors and therapists who can give you objective perspectives. Create chosen family from people who actually treat you with love and respect. Know that walking away from toxic family is not failure. It is survival. You are not being dramatic or ungrateful or cruel. You are protecting yourself from people who hurt you. That is not only acceptable, it is necessary. And here is what I wish I had known 2 years ago. You deserve people who celebrate your joy instead of stealing it. You deserve love without conditions, competitions, or cruelty. You deserve to feel safe in your relationships. You deserve to trust the people closest to you. If you do not have that, it is okay to walk away and build something better. Real love does not require you to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Real love does not demand constant sacrifice and self-denial. Real love lifts you up, supports your growth, and makes you feel more like yourself, not less. When you find that kind of love, you will know because it feels like finally breathing after a lifetime of holding your breath. It feels like coming home after years of being lost. It feels like peace. I have that now. I have a partner who loves me without trying to control me. I have friends who show up consistently without keeping score. I have a career that fulfills me and gives my life purpose. I have a home that is truly mine. A safe space no one can invade. I have healed in ways I did not think were possible. The betrayal still hurts sometimes. I still have moments of anger or sadness when I think about what Patricia did to my father, what she tried to do to me. I still grieve the family I wish I had but never did. But those moments are brief now, and they do not define my life anymore. What defines my life now is the future I am building, the love I am cultivating, the work I am doing to help others, the peace I have found within myself. Patricia tried to destroy me, but instead, she set me free. The greatest revenge is not in seeing her punished, though justice certainly mattered. The greatest victory is building a life so full of real love and genuine purpose that her betrayal became just one chapter in my story, not the whole book. I am writing new chapters now, better chapters, chapters filled with love and hope and possibility. And I am so grateful to be here, to have survived, to have the chance to help others survive too. So let me ask you, have you ever had to walk away from toxic family members? Have you experienced financial abuse or manipulation from people who claim to love you? How did you find the strength to protect yourself and rebuild? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sharing our experiences helps all of us feel less alone and gives others the courage to make hard choices. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share this video with anyone who might need to hear it. You never know whose life you might change by helping them recognize that what they are experiencing is not love, it is abuse. And if you are not already subscribed to this channel, please subscribe so you do not miss future stories. I share new content every week about overcoming trauma, recognizing abuse, and building healthier relationships. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was long and painful and intense, but I hope it gave you something valuable. I hope it helped you feel less alone if you are going through something similar. I hope it gave you permission to protect yourself, even when it feels impossible. I hope it reminded you that healing is possible, that you are stronger than you know, and that you deserve so much better than cruelty disguised as love. Take care of yourselves. Trust your instincts. Protect your peace. And never forget that you are worthy of real, genuine, unconditional love. I am sending you all so much strength and support. Until next time, keep healing, keep growing, and keep believing in the beautiful life waiting for you on the other side of survival.